Hey guys, welcome back to this channel, The Voice of the Past. In this video, we will unfold the untold story of the Fairchild family's silent witness, a murder on tape, before continuing. If you are new into this channel, please consider subscribing to this channel. Let's start. The Fairchild estate stood like a solemn sentinel at the edge of Blackwood Hollow, its towering spires piercing the gray October sky, a place of wealth, power, and whispers. Its halls had witnessed generations of triumphs and tragedies, secrets embedded in the very bones of the mansion. For decades, the Fairchild name had commanded both respect and fear. At the helm of this legacy was Jonathan Fairchild, a man whose presence alone could silence a room. Cold, calculating, and ruthless in both business and family matters, he ruled with absolute authority. His word was law. His wife, Eleanor, had once been the radiant heart of the estate, a woman whose laughter had once filled the great halls. But as the years passed, that warmth faded into something brittle. She moved like a shadow now, a ghost haunting a home she no longer felt a part of. Their children were molded by their father's hand, each bearing the scars of his expectations. Marcus, the eldest, was the most like him, ambitious, sharp, and deeply pragmatic. He was the heir, the one groomed to take over the empire. Olivia, the middle child, was a rebel in every sense. She had always resisted her father's control, her defiance a constant source of tension. And then there was Henry, the youngest. Quiet, observant, the one who always seemed to notice things that others missed. So when Jonathan Fairchild disappeared, the town of Blackwood Hollow stirred with curiosity and unease. The official story, given by Marcus himself, was that Jonathan had left on an urgent business trip. He was expected to return soon. But the days stretched into a week, and still, no sign of him. Signs of something wrong. The Fairchild estate grew heavier with silence. Something was wrong. Jonathan's car remained parked in the driveway, untouched. His clothes were still in the closet, his wallet in the bedside drawer. His phone, found in his study, was still charged. But the last call he had made was to an unknown number that led nowhere. It was Olivia who spoke what everyone else had been thinking. "He didn't leave," she said one night at the dinner table, her voice cutting through the forced small talk. "Something happened to him." Marcus tensed but kept his expression neutral. "You're being dramatic." Olivia's glare was sharp. "Am I? Because no one just vanishes like this, Marcus. No calls, no notes, nothing. Does that sound like father to you?" Henry, sitting quietly at the end of the table, lowered his spoon into his bowl. He hadn't said much, but something in his gaze suggested that he, too, felt the unease settling over the house. Eleanor, their mother, simply stared at her plate, offering no opinion. She had been unusually quiet since Jonathan's disappearance, her face distant, her mind elsewhere. That night the rain came, heavy and relentless, beating against the windows like an impatient hand demanding entry. The howling wind made the house groan, as if it too carried a secret it could not speak. And then the discovery was made. The silent witness. It was Mrs. Delacroix, the Fairchild's longtime housekeeper, who found it. She had been dusting Jonathan's study, her movements slow but precise, when she reached for a stack of papers that had fallen to the floor. As she lifted them, she spotted something wedged beneath, a small black cassette recorder, old-fashioned, bulky. Her brow furrowed as she picked it up, brushing off the thin layer of dust. Something about it unsettled her. When she pressed play, she understood why. Voices, raised voices. Jonathan's voice, unmistakable in its authority, barked something she couldn't quite make out. Another voice, agitated, familiar, argued back. Then came a sound that made her blood run cold. A sudden, violent crash. the distinct thud of something heavy, or someone, hitting the floor. And then, silence. Mrs. Delacroix's hand shook as she stopped the tape. Her breath came faster, her mind racing. Something terrible had happened in this room. Heart pounding, she clutched the recorder to her chest and hurried down the dimly lit corridors to find the Fairchild children. They needed to hear this. Mrs. Delacroix's footsteps echoed through the dimly lit corridors of Fairchild Manor. The walls, lined with portraits of stern ancestors, seemed to watch her with silent judgment as she made her way toward the drawing room where the Fairchild children sat. She clutched the cassette recorder tightly, her fingers trembling as she recalled the chilling thud that had played through the tiny speakers. She had worked in this house for over 30 years, had witnessed arguments, betrayals, and whispered secrets. But this was different. She found them gathered around the great fireplace, the embers casting flickering shadows across their tense faces. Marcus, standing near the mantel, was swirling a glass of whiskey, his expression unreadable. Olivia sat on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, her gaze sharp with suspicion. Henry rested in a leather chair, his fingers drumming softly against the armrest, his mind clearly elsewhere. Their mother Eleanor was absent, as always. Mrs. Delacroix's voice trembled as she spoke. "I found something," she said, holding up the recorder. Marcus barely glanced at it. "What is it?" "A tape," she whispered. "It was in your father's study, and I think you need to hear it." The evidence of a struggle. She placed the recorder on the coffee table and pressed play. The room filled with the crackling sound of old tape. Then came the voices. Jonathan's voice was unmistakable, sharp, commanding, but tinged with an edge of anger. "This ends tonight." A second voice, lower, urgent, furious. The words weren't entirely clear, but the tone was undeniable. Desperation. Then came the sounds of a scuffle, furniture scraping, a sudden gasp, and then a sickening thud. Then silence. The tape continued playing, but there was nothing else. No shouting, no footsteps leaving the room. Nothing. Olivia's face paled. That was him. That was his voice. Marcus downed his whiskey in one swallow. "This doesn't prove anything." "Doesn't prove anything?" Olivia hissed, shooting to her feet. "That was a fight, Marcus. That was a struggle. Someone was in there with him, and something happened. He never left this house, did he?" Henry, still seated, finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "This was recorded the night he disappeared." His siblings turned to look at him. "How do you know?" Olivia asked. Henry pointed at the clock in the study, visible in the reflection of the glass bookcase in the room's corner. He had always been good at noticing small details. The clock read 11:47 p.m. Jonathan had allegedly left on business early the next morning. But this recording happened hours before that. Mrs. Delacroix let out a shaky breath. "I think your father was murdered." A family of secrets. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus finally spoke, his voice clipped. "We don't know that. Maybe he just, what, tripped over a rug and decided never to come home again?" Olivia snapped. Henry's eyes remained on the recorder. "Someone was in that room with him." Marcus exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "All right. Let's think logically. If he was attacked, then where is he? There's no body, no sign of blood, no evidence, except for this tape, which could mean anything." "It means," Olivia said, her voice shaking, "that one of us might be responsible." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Mrs. Delacroix took a step back, her fingers gripping her apron. I shouldn't have brought this to you. I should have gone straight to the police." "No," Marcus said quickly. "Not yet." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "Why?" Worried about what they'll find? Marcus turned on her, his voice low. You think I did this? I think someone in this house did, Olivia shot back. Henry, watching both of them, simply said, Then we need to find out who. The hidden room. It was Henry who had the idea to go back to their father's study. If something happened there, he said, then there has to be some kind of evidence. Reluctantly, Marcus and Olivia followed him, with Mrs. Delacroix trailing behind, her face lined with worry. The study was exactly as Jonathan had left it, papers neatly stacked, bookshelves undisturbed. But now, in the eerie glow of the desk lamp, the room felt different. Wrong. Henry walked to the bookshelf and ran his fingers along the edges. Father always kept this room locked. He never let anyone in without permission. Marcus crossed his arms. Because he valued privacy. So what? Henry didn't respond. Instead, he reached for an old leather-bound book, one of Jonathan's favorites, and pulled it. There was a click. A mechanism shifted, and before their eyes, a hidden door creaked open from the bookshelf, revealing a narrow, dark passageway. Olivia took a step back, her heart pounding. What the hell? Mrs. Delacroix gasped. I've worked here for years and never knew about this. Henry's voice was almost a whisper. Maybe that's the point. Marcus, standing in stunned silence, finally muttered, What the hell was Father hiding? Olivia grabbed a flashlight from the desk and shone it into the passage. The air inside was stale, the walls lined with old wooden planks. It led somewhere deep within the house. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside first. Because if there was one place where the answers lay, it was in the darkness beyond that hidden door. And somewhere inside, they would find out what really happened to Jonathan Fairchild. The hidden passage was narrow and cold, the air thick with dust and time. Olivia led the way, her flashlight cutting through the darkness, the beam flickering over old wooden walls. Behind her, Marcus, Henry, and Mrs. Delacroix followed in silence, their footsteps muffled on the worn floorboards. The passage twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the house than any of them had ever been. The walls felt oppressive, as if the very bones of the house were pressing in on them. This house is nearly 200 years old, Mrs. Delacroix whispered, almost as if afraid to disturb the silence. Who knows what secrets it holds? Olivia wasn't sure she wanted to know. Then, up ahead, the corridor opened into a small, windowless room. The Room of Secrets. The room was unexpectedly neat, with a heavy oak desk, filing cabinets, and a single leather chair. The air smelled faintly of cigars and old paper. A lamp sat on the desk, its brass surface reflecting the dull light of their flashlights. Marcus stepped forward and scanned the room. This is Father's handwriting, he muttered, pointing to a stack of papers on the desk. Olivia grabbed one and read aloud. In the event of my untimely death, the truth must be revealed. The Fairchild legacy has been built on secrets, but some secrets refuse to stay buried. She looked up, her breath catching. He knew something was going to happen to him. Henry moved toward the filing cabinets, his fingers running over the polished wood. Maybe there's more. He pulled open a drawer and rifled through old records, ledgers, and documents until he stopped. His hand froze on a thick folder labeled Private, Fairchild Family. What is it? Olivia asked, stepping closer. Henry opened the folder and his eyes widened. Inside were photographs, bank statements, and letters. Some were letters addressed to Jonathan but never sent. Others were bank records showing large, unexplained withdrawals. But the most shocking were the photographs. One showed their mother, Eleanor, with a man they didn't recognize, standing outside a bank in Switzerland. Another showed Marcus at what appeared to be a private meeting with an unknown figure. The last photo made Olivia gasp. It was a blurry image, but it was clear enough. It was Jonathan Fairchild, lying motionless on the floor of his study. Marcus yanked the photograph from her hands. His face paled. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "How could this exist?" "It means," Henry said slowly, "that someone took this picture after he died." The betrayal within. The revelation stunned them into silence. Mrs. Delacroix finally spoke. "We need to leave this room." But Olivia wasn't finished. She grabbed the rest of the documents, flipping through them quickly, until she found a letter addressed to their mother. She read aloud, "Eleanor, I know what you did. I know what you and Marcus planned, but I won't let it happen. The truth will come out. If anything happens to me, it's because of you." Olivia's blood ran cold. She turned to Marcus, who had gone completely still. "Marcus," she whispered, "what did you do?" Her older brother didn't speak. His jaw clenched, his hands fist-tight at his sides. "Marcus," Henry said, his voice strangely calm. "Did you and Mother kill him?" "No," Marcus snapped. His voice was too quick, too defensive. Olivia took a step back. "Then why does Father's letter say otherwise?" A long, heavy silence stretched between them. Then, before anyone could react, Marcus moved fast, grabbing the photographs and documents and shoving them into his coat. "No one is seeing these," he said firmly. Olivia's anger boiled over. "Are you serious? Our father was murdered and you're still covering things up?" Marcus's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "You don't understand." "No, I think I understand perfectly," Olivia snapped. "You and Mother had something to hide. Father found out. He confronted you and—" "Enough!" Marcus's voice roared through the small room, silencing everyone. His expression was unreadable, his body tense. Mrs. Delacroix looked near tears. "Dear God, what have you done?" But before anyone could react further, there was a noise from the passage behind them. A soft creak. A shadow moved in the darkness. And then, someone whispered from the darkness, "You shouldn't have come here." The sound sent a chill down Olivia's spine. She turned, shining the flashlight down the passage they had entered from. But it was empty. Henry's voice was barely above a whisper. "We're not alone." Then, bang! The light bulb above them shattered, plunging the room into darkness. And before Olivia could react, a hand clamped over her mouth, pulling her backward into the shadows. The darkness swallowed Olivia whole. A hand clamped over her mouth, silencing her scream as she was yanked backward. The grip was strong, unyielding, and panic surged through her veins as she thrashed against it. Somewhere in the pitch black, she heard Marcus shout, Henry calling her name, Mrs. Delacroix gasping in fear. Then, just as suddenly as she was taken, she was released. She stumbled forward, gasping, her pulse hammering against her ribs. The flashlight she had dropped flickered wildly on the floor, its weak beam swinging across the shadows that crowded the hidden room. Someone else was in here with them. Olivia. Henry's voice was closer now. His hand found her arm, steadying her. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered, swallowing hard. "But someone grabbed me." Marcus cursed under his breath, grabbing the flashlight from the floor and shining it around. The walls and shelves threw long, jagged shadows, but no figure, no intruder could be seen. Mrs. Delacroix clutched the edge of the desk, her face ghostly pale. I told you we shouldn't have come here." "We're not leaving," Marcus said through gritted teeth, his jaw tight. Olivia's heart still pounded, her skin crawling with the feeling of being watched. "Then who the hell just grabbed me?" No one answered. But deep in the darkness of the hidden room, something shifted. A faint click, a scraping sound like furniture being moved somewhere beyond the walls. Henry's breath hitched. "There's more to this place." He shone his own flashlight toward the far end of the room, and that's when they saw it. Another door, partially concealed behind an old bookshelf. Through the hidden door, Marcus hesitated, then stepped forward and gripped the edge of the shelf. With a grunt, he pulled it aside, revealing a narrow iron door with a rusted handle. "No way," Olivia whispered. Henry swallowed hard. "How deep does this place go?" Marcus reached out and turned the handle. The door creaked open, revealing another pitch-black corridor. The air that drifted from inside was cold, stale, carrying the unmistakable scent of damp stone and decay. A basement. Olivia exchanged glances with Henry. She could see the question in his eyes. Did they dare go further? "Someone took Father's body," Marcus muttered. "And if they left through here, we need to know where it leads." Despite every instinct screaming at her to turn back, Olivia forced herself to move forward. The corridor sloped downward, the wooden walls turning into cold stone. The deeper they went, the more the walls narrowed, until it felt as if they were being swallowed by the very house itself. They passed rusty lanterns, old as the manor itself, and the air grew colder, biting at their skin. Then, abruptly, the passage opened into a large underground chamber, and what they saw stopped them in their tracks. The Fairchild Crypt. The room was lined with tombs. Massive stone slabs, carved with the names of Fairchild ancestors, rested against the walls. Dust coated everything, undisturbed for decades, except for one thing. In the center of the room, the dust had been disturbed, as if something heavy had been dragged across the stone floor. Olivia's chest tightened. "This is a crypt." "A family crypt," Henry murmured, shining his flashlight over the weathered tombs. "We had one this deep below the house?" Mrs. Delacroix crossed herself, her lips moving in silent prayer. "The original Fairchilds. They believed in keeping their dead close." Marcus moved toward the disturbed area of dust, his expression dark. Something was moved here. A coffin, maybe. "No?" Henry's voice was eerily quiet. "Not a coffin." Olivia followed his gaze until she saw it. At the far end of the crypt, one tomb had been forced open. The stone slab that had once sealed it was cracked and shifted, leaving just enough space to peer inside. Olivia's stomach turned as she stepped closer, her heart hammering in her chest. Then, with trembling fingers, she raised the flashlight and shone it inside. The missing corpse. Inside the tomb, there was no body, no decayed remains, no dusty bones, just an empty space, except for one thing. A single object lay in the center of the stone slab, a gold pocket watch, one that Olivia recognized immediately. Her breath caught in her throat. "That's Father's." Marcus reached in, lifting the watch with trembling fingers. He turned it over, and there, engraved on the back, were 3 words. "Time's up, Marcus." The room plunged into silence. Mrs. Delacroix made a choked sound, backing away. "No. No, this isn't possible." Olivia's blood turned to ice. "Who put this here?" Henry's expression was unreadable. "Whoever did this? They wanted us to find it." Marcus snapped the watch shut, his hands clenched into fists. "This has to be some kind of message." "But from who?" Olivia whispered. As if in answer, a sudden gust of cold air blew through the crypt, extinguishing their flashlights for just a split second. And in that moment, a voice echoed through the dark chamber, software whispers on the wind. "You were never meant to find this place." Olivia's breath seized. The whisper had been right behind her. She spun, but no one was there. A loud crash shattered the silence coming from somewhere in the crypt. The shadows seemed to shift, closing in around them. Marcus grabbed Olivia's wrist. "We need to go. Now." They turned and ran, their footsteps pounding against the stone floor, hearts racing. But as they fled the crypt, the voice followed them, soft and chilling. It's too late to turn back now. The cold air bit at their skin as they ran through the narrow passageway, their footsteps pounding against the ancient stone floor. The whispers followed them, swirling through the darkness like unseen hands reaching out, clawing at their heels. You were never meant to find this place. The words echoed in Olivia's mind, chilling her more than the crypt itself. They burst through the hidden doorway, back into Jonathan Fairchild's secret study, gasping for breath. Marcus slammed the door shut behind them, bolting it with shaking hands. His face was pale, sweat glistening on his brow. "What the hell was that?" Olivia hissed, spinning to face him. Marcus shook his head. "I don't know." Henry looked back at the door, his expression unreadable. It wasn't just a voice. Someone was down there with us. Mrs. Delacroix clutched the edge of the desk, her lips moving in silent prayer. "This place is cursed." Olivia wasn't sure she disagreed. The crypt, the empty tomb, their father's gold pocket watch with the haunting inscription, it all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Jonathan Fairchild hadn't just disappeared. Someone had taken him, someone close to them, and worse, someone was still watching them. A warning from the past. Marcus sat down heavily in the leather chair behind the desk, running his hands through his hair. He looked tired, defeated. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "If someone killed him, why move his body?" "To make sure we never found him," Olivia said. "But they didn't expect us to find the crypt." Henry leaned forward, placing Jonathan's pocket watch on the desk. "And whoever it is, they wanted us to see this." He traced a finger over the engraved words. "Time's up, Marcus." Olivia's stomach twisted as she looked at her older brother. "Marcus, did you know about the crypt?" Marcus hesitated for half a second, but Olivia caught it. "You did," she whispered, realization slamming into her. "You knew it was down there. You just never told us." Marcus exhaled sharply. "Yes, I knew about it. Father told me when I was younger. It was part of the Fairchild legacy. He said it was a safe place for the family, but I never thought he actually used it. I never thought to look there." Olivia's anger flared. "You've been keeping secrets from us this whole time?" "Not just him," Henry murmured. He was still flipping through the documents they had taken from the hidden room. Mother was involved too. Olivia turned to him. "What do you mean?" Henry laid out a letter on the desk. It was written in Jonathan's handwriting. "Eleanor, I know what you did. I know what you and Marcus planned. But I won't let it happen. The truth will come out. If anything happens to me, it's because of you." The air left Olivia's lungs. She turned to Marcus, her voice shaking. "What did you do?" Marcus's face darkened. "I didn't kill him." "But you were planning something," Henry said evenly. "Weren't you?" A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Marcus spoke. "I was trying to take control of the family business," he admitted. "Father and I had been at war over it for months. He wanted to keep things traditional, but I was trying to make moves, big moves. And Mother was on my side." He looked up at them, his blue eyes filled with something Olivia couldn't quite place. Regret? Fear? "He found out," Marcus continued, "and he threatened to disown me, to take everything from me." Mrs. Delacroix let out a strangled gasp. "Oh, Lord!" Olivia's pulse pounded in her ears. "So you confronted him that night?" Marcus hesitated again. "Yes." Henry's voice was deadly calm. "Did you kill him?" Marcus's gaze snapped up. "Number, I swear to you," I argued with him, but I left the study before midnight. He was still alive when I walked out of that room. "Then who killed him?" Olivia whispered. Silence. Then a chilling sound filled the room. A slow, deliberate knock on the door. A visitor in the night. The knock was soft, patient, unnatural. Knock, knock, knock. Marcus froze. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Henry reached for the fire poker by the fireplace, gripping it like a weapon. Mrs. Delacroix whimpered, her hands clasped over her mouth. No one moved. Knock, knock, knock. Marcus swallowed hard. Who's there? Silence. Then, a voice just beyond the door. Jonathan Fairchild is dead. A chill sliced through Olivia's body. It wasn't just the words, it was the voice. A voice she recognized. The door handle began to turn. Olivia's heart slammed against her ribs. She lunged forward, slamming her hand against the door and locking it just in time. A long pause. Then the voice on the other side whispered, "You can't hide the truth forever." Then, footsteps. Slow. Retreating. Fading into the halls of Fairchild Manor. Olivia turned to Marcus, her voice shaking. Who was that? Marcus's face was ashen. Mother. The room stood in silence, the echoes of their mother's voice lingering in the air like a phantom. Olivia's hands trembled as she backed away from the door. Marcus had gone pale, his usual control crumbling at the edges. She's alive, Henry murmured. She's been here the whole time. Mrs. Delacroix's hands shook as she clutched the crucifix around her neck. Oh, dear Lord. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the ticking of their father's gold pocket watch on the desk. Then Olivia made a decision. I'm going after her. Marcus's head snapped up. Are you insane? No, Olivia shot back. We need answers. She knows what happened to Father. She could be dangerous, Henry warned. She's our mother. Marcus exhaled, then clenched his jaw. Fine. But we're going together. Without another word, they grabbed their flashlights and moved cautiously into the dark corridors of Fairchild Manor. Somewhere, in the depths of this house, their mother was waiting. And so was the truth. Following the shadows. The house was silent as they walked through its darkened halls, the only sound their own footsteps echoing against the wooden floors. The storm outside had picked up again, wind rattling the windows, rain tapping like fingers against the glass. Every corner felt alive with ghosts, every shadow hiding something unseen. Henry's flashlight swept across the portraits lining the hallway, portraits of their ancestors, staring down at them with vacant eyes. Then, at the far end of the hallway, they saw her. Eleanor Fairchild stood just beyond the grand staircase, her silhouette barely visible in the dim light. Her long gray nightgown billowed slightly in the breeze from a nearby open window. Her once beautiful face was thin, hollow, her expression unreadable. But her eyes were clear, sharp, completely aware. You shouldn't have come this far, she murmured. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. Mother, where is Father? Eleanor's gaze drifted past them, toward the hallway they had just left. You found the crypt. Marcus's jaw clenched. Yes, and we found his pocket watch, with a message for me. Their mother gave a slow nod. Good. Olivia's breath hitched. What do you mean, good? Eleanor turned and began to walk away from them, deeper into the house. If you want to know the truth, she called over her shoulder, follow me. Olivia hesitated, but only for a moment. Then she stepped forward, and the others followed. The final secret. Eleanor led them through a hidden door behind the library, down a narrow staircase that twisted deep beneath the manor. At the bottom, she pushed open a heavy wooden door, revealing a second chamber beneath the crypt, a room none of them had ever seen before. Inside, a single chair sat in the center, facing an old desk. The air was heavy, thick with dust and age, and on the desk, a tape recorder, an identical tape recorder to the one they had found in their father's study. Olivia's breath caught. You knew about the recording, Eleanor nodded. I left it for you to find. Marcus stared at her. Why? Eleanor finally turned to face them. To make sure you knew the truth. Then, with slow, deliberate hands, she pressed play on the second recorder. The room filled with Jonathan Fairchild's voice. Eleanor, you think you can outmaneuver me? I know everything. I know what you and Marcus planned, but I won't let you win. If you think you can get rid of me, you're mistaken. A pause. A breath. Then Eleanor's voice. We don't need to get rid of you, Jonathan. You've already lost. This house will never belong to you again. Then, a struggle. A sharp sound of a chair scraping. A heavy thud. A gasp. And then, Jonathan's final words. You think you've won, but Fairchilds never die alone. The tape clicked off. Silence. Marcus staggered back, his breath shaking. No. Olivia's hands clenched into fists. You killed him. Eleanor met her daughter's eyes, her expression calm. Yes. A sharp gasp came from Mrs. Delacroix. Henry's face remained unreadable. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. Olivia's voice rose. You planned this with Marcus? Eleanor shook her head. I knew he wanted control of the business, but I had my own reasons. She stepped closer. Your father was a cruel man, Olivia. He hurt people. He hurt me. And when he found out Marcus was trying to take over, he threatened to ruin us all, to destroy everything, to erase my name from this house, to cut me off, to... She stopped, her breath shuddering. I couldn't let him. A long silence stretched between them. Then Henry's voice, quiet but sharp. So you killed him. Eleanor's gaze never wavered. I ended him. Olivia took a step back, disgust curling in her stomach. You hid the body, she whispered. You made it look like he disappeared. Eleanor nodded. I moved him to the crypt, but when I heard you three snooping around, I moved him again. Marcus's voice was hoarse. Where is he now? Eleanor looked at her eldest son. Gone. A heavy silence, then she sighed. I buried him, where no one will ever find him. Olivia shook her head. You're a monster. Eleanor gave a sad smile. No, my dear. Your father was the monster. I simply survived him. Olivia turned away, her heart pounding in her chest. Henry was still staring at Eleanor, his mind processing everything. Marcus's hands were tight fists at his sides, his entire body trembling. Mrs. Delacroix sobbed into her hands. The truth had been revealed, but no one felt victorious. The Fairchild legacy ends. Marcus was the first to break the silence. We're calling the police. Eleanor laughed softly. Are you? Marcus's lips curled. Yes. Eleanor exhaled, then stepped away from the desk, hands raised. Very well, she murmured. Do what you must. Marcus pulled out his phone, dialing. For the first time in centuries, the secrets of Fairchild Manor would no longer remain buried. And with that, the Fairchild family's reign of power ended. Epilogue. A house without ghosts. 1 year later, Fairchild Manor was sold. Marcus took over the family business, but on his own terms. Henry left the estate and moved to the city, finally free of his family's dark past. Olivia never returned. And Eleanor? Eleanor Fairchild was sentenced to life in prison. The house, once full of secrets and ghosts, stood silent. And for the first time in generations, the darkness of Fairchild Manor finally lifted.